everybody. Welcome to another online lecture. Right now, I'd like to discuss Michael Moss's The Extraordinary Science of Addictive Junk Food. It starts on page 471 of your textbook. Now, like the previous text by Michaela Collington, this essay is also about a personal experience. And in this essay, Moss, who is a CEO and a very powerful man within the food industry, wants to meet with other CEOs of other corporations like Nestle, Kraft, Frito-Lay, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, etc., because he wants to convince people that since they do have so much power and so much money, that the food industry should use that power to help America overcome its epidemic dealing with obesity. So when the essay opens on page 471, it says, on the evening of April 8th, 1999, a long line of town cars and taxis pulled up to the Minneapolis headquarters of Pillsbury and discharged 11 men who controlled America's largest food companies. So instead of a very dry, very factual type writing, you have the use of descriptive writing going on here. And Moss is using descriptive writing because he wants to communicate the importance of these men. So it's not just some scientific research study that has been performed that he wants to quote to you. He wants you to fully understand these men's position within American society. And so he starts to list who all is in attendance, and he tells you that Nestle and Kraft and Nabisco and Procter & Gamble, and he just continues the list for you. And he, at the very bottom of page 471, he says, their stature was defined by their skill in fighting one another for what they called stomach share. So you have some technical terms and some jargon that's going on in this essay, and you need to pay attention to how he uses the jargon, what his purpose is for that jargon, and then how he uses definition writing and example writing to explain the terminology to you. So as you turn the page, he says, digestive space that any one company's brand can grab from the competition. So he defines it for you. Then he introduces the first person, John Beckney, a 55-year-old executive at Pillsbury. He greeted all the men as they arrived, and then they're all coming into this boardroom to discuss America's growing weight problem. Now on that page, you'll see the use of dialogue and voice markers. And this is very important when you're writing a lengthy essay, or for any essay for that matter. You want to definitely indicate who is speaking. It says, quote, we were very concerned, and rightfully so, that obesity was becoming a major issue, end quote, Benke recalled. People were starting to talk about sugar taxes, and there was a lot of pressure on food companies. So these men are meeting because the government and American society was putting pressure on food manufacturers to, one, recognize what is in their food, two, to describe how many calories, three, list allergies, etc. But this is also during the point in time where people are becoming very concerned about portion size. McDonald's had been very strong in the food industry, and this is during the size of super size and things like that. So there's been a backlash in American society, and the continuum of opinions being discussed in this essay. If you look on page 473, the first full paragraph, it says, the discussion took place in Pillsbury's auditorium. The first speaker was a vice president of Kraft named Michael Mudd. I very much appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about childhood obesity and the growing challenge it presents for all of us, Mudd began. Let me say right at the start, this is not an easy subject. There are no easy answers for what the public health community must do to bring this problem under control, or for what the industry should do as others seek to hold it accountable for what has happened. But this much is clear. For those of us who have looked hard at this issue, whether they're public health professionals or staff specialists in your own companies, we feel sure that the one thing we shouldn't do is nothing. Now, I don't know if you recall, but at one point in time, when we were talking about the continuum of opinion in the class, and we were talking about the different ways that you can use sources, we did discuss the fact of ambivalence. And what's being brought up here in this passage and in this quote is the fact that ambivalence can no longer remain in power. The sides need to be taken, otherwise the obesity epidemic in America will continue to grow. And the paragraph continues about what MUD is saying, and they bring in the Disease Control and Prevention and the American Heart Association, and then they compare the obesity problem and the addiction of junk food to cigarette smoking and nicotine and cancer. Now, if I was in the classroom, I would ask you, why do you think that they're doing this? But obviously I can't do that. So I'm just going to tell you, the reason that they're doing this is because it's become well known that cigarette smoking leads to lung cancer, and we have millions and millions of people dying from lung cancer due to cigarette smoke or secondhand cigarette smoke. And so Moss believes that if he uses this comparison, that you're going to be more compelled to listen to what he has to say about his argument. And this is addressed on page 474. If anyone in the food industry ever doubted there was a slippery slope out there, Mudd said, I imagine they are beginning to experience a distinct sliding sensation right about now. Mudd presented the plan he and others had devised to address the obesity problem. Merely getting the executives to acknowledge some culpability was an important first step, he knew. So his plan would start off with a small but crucial move. The industry should use the expertise of scientists, its own and others, to gain a deeper understanding of what is driving Americans to overeat. So this is a very interesting question. A lot of times we think it's just a matter of willpower that people tend to overeat. And what you're about to learn in this essay is it's not just a matter of willpower, but there is science in the food industry that causes people to crave what they're eating, to not feel satiated by what they're eating. And the food companies know this, and they specifically devise these formulas within our food so that people will continue to eat. It helps them grow their business, they earn more money, but at the same time, people across America and the world, for that matter, are declining in their health. And this is what he's pointing out. So in order to support his argument, he brings in Yoplait and what they did with their food. Now, yogurt tends to be associated with being a healthy food. However, what most people didn't realize at the time is that Yoplait had more sugar in it than a can of soda. It had more sugar in it than a candy bar. And so there was this image that if you ate yogurt, you were going to be healthy, but people were gaining weight and they didn't know why. Well, the reason is that Yoplait had so much sugar in it, people weren't paying attention to the sugar alcohols or the calories that were within the yogurt. They were just eating the yogurt. So they weren't reading the nutritional facts on the package. Well, Yoplait decided that they still wanted more stomach share, so they invented something called Go-Grit, which is basically just plastic packages filled with yogurt that you could take on the go and not have to eat with a spoon. I actually buy Go-Grit for my grandchild as an alternative to ice cream because I throw the packages in the freezer, and when she wants a treat, we let her eat frozen Go-Grit instead of having ice cream. There isn't a lot of difference in the amount of sugar content. The yogurt has just as much sugar as the ice cream does, but the yogurt does have the acidophilus in it to help with stomach cultures and things like that. So Moss is discussing this in his essay. And so he lets you know that Yoplait earned over $500 million through this marketing campaign with Go-Grit. And I would like to make you stop and think for a second. How do you feel knowing that you thought you were making a healthy food choice by eating yogurt, and then you find out, whoa, wait a second, there's more sugar in yogurt than there is in soda and candy bars? Man, that doesn't feel so good. But I can imagine that quite a few of you young people in my classrooms have grown up eating this Go-Gurt and yogurt, and then there came a point in time when the serving sizes got smaller, and that was due to the sugar content. If you look on page 476, the first full paragraph, according to the sources I spoke with, Sanger began by reminding the group that consumers were fickle. Did you think you were fickle? Did you think that you would prefer to have unhealthy food because it tastes good instead of being healthy and being able to play your sports or live a healthy lifestyle? Well, that's what the food industry tends to think. It's not just Michael Moss. He's quoting people within the food industry. And this is somebody from General Mills. And so Banky is responding to Sanger, and he's like, I can't believe that these people were not receptive to wanting to address the obesity problem. And when you look on page 477, they start giving you statistics about the amount of people that are obese and the amount of people that have diabetes. And it says, today, 1 in 3 adults is considered clinically obese, along with 1 in 5 kids. And 24 million Americans are afflicted by type 2 diabetes. That means that they were not born with diabetes. They developed the diabetes through their habits regarding eating and exercise. And then it also says another 79 million people have pre-diabetes. And so Moss is wanting you to realize how much control the food industry has over Americans' health. And then if you look at the bottom of 477, he has a section entitled, In This Field, I'm a Game Changer. And he starts off with John Lennon couldn't find it in England, so he shipped it from New York to fuel Imagine Sessions. And he keeps listing all these famous people such as ZZ Top and Cher and Hillary Clinton. And I was reading along and I was like, what in the world could all these people have in common? And it was Dr. Pepper. Can you believe that all these people wanted Dr. Pepper? Well, Dr. Pepper was the 3rd largest ranked soda in the nation. But it was losing numbers to Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And that was because Coca-Cola and Pepsi were coming out with other things, and Dr. Pepper was staying with the same formula. So Dr. Pepper decided it needed to use science in order to boost their stomach share, right? And so it gives you the story about Red Fusion and about Cadbury Schweppes in 2004 turning to Howard Moskowitz to come up with some sort of scientific formula to make people want to drink more Dr. Pepper. And it talks about all these surveys that they did, all these blind test studies that they did, until they finally come up with vanilla cherry Dr. Pepper. And then Moss is like, well, maybe you won't believe everything that I'm saying, so let me tell you a little bit about something called MREs. Now, MREs are rations that soldiers use in the field because it takes up less space to carry these, excuse me, in relation to regular food. And what they found was, yeah, all the, flavors like turkey tetrazzini and all this, they liked having them, but it wasn't something that they kept returning to. They kept wanting, like, bread and the other staple flavors. And this became known as sensory-specific satiety. And you can see this on page 480. This contradiction is known as sensory-specific satiety. In lay terms, it is the tendency for big, distinct flavors to overwhelm the brain, which responds by depressing your desire to have more. Sensory-specific satiety also became a guiding principle for the processed food industry. The biggest hits, be they Coca-Cola or Doritos, owe their success to complex formulas that pique the taste buds enough to be alluring, but don't have a distinct, overriding, single flavor that tells the brain to stop eating. Now, something that's not mentioned a lot in this essay that I really wish Moss would have mentioned is the fact that our taste buds on our tongue actually replenish themselves. I think it's every 6 weeks. So if you can leave a food alone for more than 6 weeks, you can tend to break a habit about wanting a particular food. I really wish he would have brought that more into this, but they use that to talk about how Dr. Pepper brought about its next formula. So that's your second technical term, sensory specific satiety. Then turn the page to 482 and you have, it's called vanishing caloric density. Now here's another scientific name that Moss is using, but he's going to define it, give you examples, and then tell you why it's important to his argument. And he takes you to Los Angeles in 1985 to a professor of pharmacology from Helsinki called Heikki Karppinen. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know if I am. And how they talked about Finland's desire to address the salt habit. So people were taking in too much salt and they wanted to reduce it. And they started talking about high salt content and how it affected people's health. And Frito-Lay caught on to this, and they started implementing some stuff into their food related to salt content. Well, Frito-Lay got a bad rap because they were using too much salt, and people started not buying as much Frito-Lay products. And so then they had to mess with the science of junk food and figure out another way to get people to eat it. And this is talked about on page 484 and 485. And so Frito-Lay is like, well, maybe we should also determine who exactly is eating our products, what their age are, what their age is, what their gender is, how much they're eating, when they're eating it, what's the purpose, etc. And what they found out was older people were eating it just as much as younger people. And in fact, older people were eating it in higher quantities than younger people because the satiety level changes, and older people are like, I don't care whether or not I'm as healthy as I used to be. I'm old anyway. Okay? So they're talking about this throughout page 485. They're talking about the baby boomers acting this way. And then on page 486, they bring in the food technicians. Okay? And they start talking to you about new products and what they call line extensions. And this is where you get the salt and vinegar, the salt and pepper, the cheddar and sour cream flavors for the different potato chips. So all these fun flavors that you see out on the market, this is all related to science. This is science to get people addicted to certain types of food. And so Michael Moss is laying out all these sources, and he's telling you what people are saying on both sides of the continuum related to the science and how this science is affecting American health. On page 488, there is an annotation on the side of your text, and it says, see chapter 4 for ways to agree and disagree simultaneously. And it's the last paragraph on that page. Let's read it. There's a paradox at work here. On the one hand, reduction of sodium in snack foods is commendable. On the other, these changes may well result in consumers eating more. The big thing that will happen here is removing the barriers for boomers and giving them permission to snack, Carey said. The prospects for lower salt snacks were so amazing, he added, that the company has set it in its sights on using the designer salt to conquer the toughest market of all for snacks, schools. Oh no! They're going after American youth, students like you, with this designer salt. If we're going to reduce the sodium, you're going to want to eat more because you're not getting too much salt, so you can eat more food. Well, guess what? It also applies to the baby boomers. Baby boomers are like, the salt's lower, so I can eat more. So now the food industry has not only the baby boomers, but they have the millennials as well. They have the Gen Xers. Everybody's getting addicted to the scientifically processed foods. And so he continues to give you quotes from different sources. He lays out both sides of the continuum of opinion regarding it. He even brings in the New England Journal of Medicine, and their studies. And on page 491, he says, Robert Lynn first tangled with Frito-Lay on the imperative of the company to deal with the formulation of his snacks. But as we sat at his dining room table, sifting through his records, the feelings of regret still played on his face. In his view, 3 decades had been lost, time that he and a lot of other smart scientists could have spent searching for ways to ease the addiction to salt, sugar, and fat. I couldn't do much more about it, he told me. I feel so sorry for the public. So this guy who worked for Frito-Lay, who helped the industry create this designer salt, realized he had destroyed American health, and now he has no way to change it. Because now American society is addicted to the science of junk food. So he's joining Moss's campaign to want to try to change things. And so he agreed to be interviewed by Moss and for Moss to use his research. This takes a lot of courage for somebody to stand up and say, you know what, I did something, I'm not proud of it, and it was wrong, and I don't know what to do about it. Would you be able to do that? Would you be able to give up a career that you've spent decades building to do the right thing? That would be a tough call for a lot of people, especially when you're living paycheck to paycheck. It would take a trust in Jesus to supply all your needs. It would take a trust in who you are as a person to know that you're going to be okay no matter what. And this is what this guy did when he joined Moss's plight. So the next section is called These People Need a Lot of Things, but They Don't Need a Coke. So Moss then starts looking at advertising and how people use advertisements to convince people of certain things. And what happened was people were traveling overseas and they were seeing how impoverished people don't even have blankets or food or water or toilets. And yet you see these commercials where supposedly a Coke is going to make everything okay. And Moss realized people need more than just Coke. And he thought, what can I do? And he started talking to Todd Putman, and he started talking to Dunn. And on page 493, it says, Dunn told me that talking about Coke's business today was by no means easy, and because he continues to work in the food business, not without risk. Quote, you really don't want them mad at you, end quote, he said. And I don't mean that like I'm going to end up at the bottom of the bay, but they don't have a sense of humor when it comes to the stuff. They're a very, very aggressive company. Moss writes, when I met with Dunn, he told me not just about this year's at Coke, but also about the new marketing venture. In April 2010, he met with 3 executives from Madison Dearborn Partners, a private equity firm based in Chicago with a wide-ranging portfolio of investments. They recently hired Dunn to run one of their newest acquisitions, a food producer in San Joaquin Valley. As they sat in the hotel's meeting room, the men listened to Dunn's marketing pitch. He talked about giving the product a personality that was bold and irreverent, conveying the idea that this was the ultimate snack food. He went on to detail how he would target a special segment of the 146 million Americans who are regular snackers, mothers, children, young professionals. Keep their snacking ritual fresh by trying a new food product when it catches their attention. This product that the man was proposing was not a new Coca-Cola line extension. This product was packages of baby carrots. The food industry thought the man was insane to even be proposing this, but the man had already purchased land, had already been growing baby carrots. They laughed at him, but now who's laughing? Baby carrots in the supermarket are there all the time. We now have prepackaged kale chips and prepackaged celery and veggie trays. So what the junk food industry taught some of the food executives was, look for a way to earn a buck, but try to do it in a moral way. So do you agree with Moss's argument? Do you think more people should stand up to the food companies? Do you think there should be more whistleblowers? Or do you think everybody has a right to earn a buck and that Americans have a choice on what they eat? And it isn't the food company's fault. Americans should just, know that there's designer science going into their food. But does everybody really know that? Do parents tell their little children that the junk food that they're eating is created by a special scientific blend that's meant to cause them to be addicted to it? Probably not. Not a lot of parents are going to say that. So what do you think of Moss's essay? Do you think you could stand up to people? That's the question I want you to consider. How do your morals enmesh, which means to intertwine, to link with your job? Which one would you choose? Would you choose like Moss did? Would you make a different path? And that's a question that we can discuss more in the classroom. Be blessed, and I'll see you on the next video.